We're going to be talking about the economic hardship and the fact that pockets of protest have already started to appear in certain cities across the country and what it means for the future of Nigeria. I'm joined here now by Adeyemi Jimo and Fola Daniel. Thanks a lot for being here today.
Thank you so much, Ebuka.
Welcome back, Fola. Let me start with you now, because I mean, we've seen so many statistics and data rolled out by the NBS in the last couple of weeks, and I think seeing the inflation figures was particularly scary. Even though, as scary as it is, most people say it's even higher if we're talking in real terms. I think we hear that it's about 29.9% inflation. Food inflation is even higher at about 35%. Most people say it's probably close to 40. If anybody's going to the markets and seeing what's the price of goods in the last couple of months and all of that. A lot of people continue to talk about the central bank. And it doesn't look like Nigerians seem to understand the difference between monetary and fiscal policy and the role of government outside of the CBN to start fixing these things. What are your thoughts on where we are? We don't seem to hear a lot from the Ministry of Finance. At least we haven't heard from them a lot in the last couple of weeks. The MPC is coming up in a couple of weeks. What are your thoughts on where we are and what it's looking like?
I think that we're not ready to make the right decisions and we're just shifting the blames. We're currently still playing the blame game. That's why we're here. If we're ready to do exactly what we want to do, and I thought about it and I said I was going to ask you a question. Take, for example, what kind of phone do you use? Don't answer the question. But you see, I just know that it's not made in Nigeria. And until we come back to what are we using, what are we consuming, and where is it from? If we don't take that thing back to the basis, then we're not going to get out of this situation. So we're in this problem, and the reason we're going to keep talking about central bank is because we just believe that the central bank can make a decision and it will give us the leverage over the dollar. It's not going to happen. The only thing that will happen is that we have to do something. And that's the other part that I have a problem with. Nigerians also feel that the president will just take a decision and all of a sudden, Naira will go up, dollar will come down, or they will be at par. It's never going to happen. You know how we're going to get out of this mess? We're going to produce, we're going to export. If we don't produce and we don't export, forget it. We're still going to be in this mess for a while. The only other way around it is some policies that the Senate, the House of Assembly, the National Assembly as a whole can work on. For example, make sure that we limit a lot of the things that we're still importing that we don't need or can produce in Nigeria. The moment some people will start shouting because some people import those things, that's their own business. They would feel highly impacted by that decision. However, it's going to benefit a lot of Nigerians to say, okay, why are we importing clothes when we have Adire? Why are we importing clothes when we can manufacture here in Nigeria? Why are we bringing in food when we can produce food? Why is it that we don't have enough food in Nigeria? It's because a number of people have left the farms. When the government can do irrigation, you don't have to wait for rainy season to plant.
But just to counter that a bit now, there's a lot of these things you're talking about. Let's even zero in on agriculture, which every government, at least I know, we all did Operation Feed the Nation. We read all of these things in school. These are not things that started today. But people will tell you today that, at least with agriculture, for example, there's not going to be a headway without fixing something like security. We've seen what's happened in the last couple of years, where there's been what government likes to call bandits, who have continually made food production, distribution and supply a problem. So even if people want to go back to the farms, how safe are they going to feel?
In this same country, somebody who was head of state said that if a crisis, insecurity lasts more than 24 hours, the government knows about it.
So you're saying it still rests with the government?
Exactly. So as far as I'm concerned, insecurity is not a big deal at all. If we want to solve that problem, we can solve it. If we want to deal with them, we can deal with them. However, we need to be tougher on ourselves than we are. If we don't become tougher on ourselves, we're not going to get out of this crisis.
Let me come to you, Adeyemi, now, because you mentioned a lot about production there, and a lot of people hear that, but think this seems very long-term. You're not going to suddenly become a producing nation overnight. We've seen countries do it, especially the Asian tigers, like we like to call them, who over a couple of decades turned around their economies. But Nigeria cannot, as it is, wait for that long. What sort of short to medium term things can government start thinking about? I mean, we've seen figures thrown around. 23 trillion naira was allegedly thrown into ways and means. Most people have not heard of ways and means until the last presidency. We're hearing all of these terms and starting to understand what's gone wrong. Are those things going to fix things in the short to medium term, you think?
So, Ebuka, to be candid with you, I won't say there are any short fixes, because short fixes are just temporary. And like he said earlier, trying to solve most of these issues, once you're able to do that, it comes back after several months. It's not something that's always sustainable. So I think I'll just have to agree with him on what he said, that the solution to most of these issues we have is actually trying to fix our production problem. We have a massive production problem, and if we can't fix that, no short-term solution will even translate to medium or long-term solutions. And I'll just break it down further. The same agricultural products we're talking about, we have the crops and the likes. It's interesting that a lot of grains that we actually use to plant here are being imported. So one way or the other, everything is still burning back to an FX problem. So that's why when you see these issues of FX coming up, you see the likes of agri-products having serious issues. Everybody's saying the price of producing this grain is up, the price of doing that is up. So one thing we have to look at is actually trying to tackle those problems. Yes, it might seem steep, it might seem long term, but the major solutions to what we are having now is just to try and fix those problems. If we are overly reliant on, say, importing everything from abroad, there are no short fixes, there are no long fixes, there's no medium-term fixes. We'll continue to bottle down to the same problems we've been having. We just tend to fix it for the short term. In 3, 4, 5, 6 months, the same thing happens. A critical example is what happened when they banned rice and we had local production coming into play. That was not sustainable. They first came in, then we saw them trying to compete with foreign investors with the price of local rice that should have been cheaper. Moving up higher, we saw it competing with those of foreign produced rice. We saw at one point it went from 7,000 to 12,000, up until 30-something thousand. It became very unattractive. So if our local markets are being unattractive, I don't think there are any fix. So in order to actually tackle these issues in the short term, we need to put in place means and measures to ensure that most of these things we're doing are produced locally. And then for the pricing, I think there should be a kind of price control board. Yes, we have the commodity board that they said we're going to come in, but if there's supply deficit, I don't know what the commodity board is coming to control. So I think if we're able to actually tackle that, it will go a long way to helping us. Like I said, it's not really a short-term solution, but if we can tackle that from the grassroots and bring it up, in, say, mid to long term, we'll see the impact of these things we're talking about.
There's been controversial opinions talking about the fact that, the ban on importation of certain foods needs to be lifted, at least in this short term, because of the food crisis we're witnessing. We keep hearing, we're going to open the National Grain Reserve. I don't know where the grains go to because nobody ever really sees them. So are those things are those going to help? Because there's also the counter argument that, well, if you open up the borders again and say food can come in, what does it do to local production? But when there's no food and when pricing has become as scary as it is, what are your thoughts on something like that helping in any way?
Okay, so for me, trying to lift the ban on importation, I would just say it's a two-edged sword, and I'll just put it in two ways. Fine, in the short run, banning it might be a temporary solution while we try to put in place means and measures to sustain our local markets. So if we don't have the required supply, we have excess demand, there's no way we won't have issues we're having. There's no way inflation will not come up, because it's a simple demand and supply logic. Demand is high, supply is low. What will definitely happen is the price will go up. So I'll say in the short run, we can open the borders while we try to tackle our in-house problem. Fine, people might say, some people are for the argument of closing the borders, trying to sustain what we have now. But I'm like, whilst you're trying to actually fix your local markets, we can open the border. It can be for a short term, it can be for a short period of time. Have it in mind, or be conscious and make good effort about that. Okay, this particular thing I want to achieve it in 3 months, I want to achieve it in 6 months. And after 6 months, I close it. We should be self-sustaining by then. Not just picking it, we need intentionality in order to carry it out. So once we're able to do that, I think closing the border would not really be an issue, because once we're able to sustain our local markets, then we won't have to talk about opening or closing the border, because our markets will be more attractive than even the foreign markets.
But let's talk about this Naira now, because we all grew up at a time when if the Naira appreciates by 20 Naira over a year, it's a big deal. Now it's happening by the hour, pretty much. Like I said, it got about 1,009 at some point last week. Today, I'm seeing 1,005. The CBN governor continues to insist that the naira is undervalued. But there are also people who say it is overvalued still and should probably get to about 3,000 naira. Nobody seems to know what the situation is. This 1,005, I'm not sure if it's a fluke or if it's a real thing. So maybe two questions here. What is happening now? And what does the naira look like? Because yes, inflation is one thing, but as the naira continues to depreciate, purchasing power continues to sink, doesn't it?
Okay, so two quick things. Before I come to the naira, let me also take you back a bit on the food stuff. You see, I don't think that the problem is that we're not producing enough in this country. Take, for example, I lived very close to a food market for several years, and I realized that if you talk to the northerners, they will tell you that the bigger problem is storage. So if you see 2 trucks of food coming to Lagos, more than 6 trucks are wasted in the north. If you see 10 trucks coming to Lagos, more than 20 trucks are wasted in the north. So what we need to be doing is to create storage facilities for this food and put in place the transport infrastructure. Storage and transport, which are 2 things that we can simply partner with China to make happen. Now, if the guys who are producing, they know, for example, have you ever wondered why you buy bananas and the moment you take them home, you realize that under 2 days it's almost spoiling? But this thing has been at the supermarket for weeks or for days. It's not getting spoiled. It remained fresh. What happened? It came home and in 2 days it's spoiling. It's because those guys at the supermarket know the proper refrigerating range for it. So they can keep it in that state for weeks. There are experts who know the appropriate range, temperature for all the various food items, fruits, whatever it is, and they can keep it refrigerated for weeks. So we need storage and we need transport. Now back to the naira, where we have a power play here, and the power play is first of all internal and the other one external. Don't forget that the crisis, the inflation we're experiencing is not just in Nigeria. UK officially has declared recession, and unfortunately we keep importing. We keep taking from them, and there is more demand. People are going to go to school very soon in April, and there's another school season. And UK is an economy that depends absolutely on a lot of foreigners coming into their country to come and study. Where do those people get money from? They will go to the banks and ask for pounds. Those are going to the US will go to the banks and ask for US dollars. So the excessive demand for the foreign currency within Nigeria, excessive demand for something we don't produce, is the major problem that we're having to deal with. And a way around it is very simple. Number one, if we fix our schools and a lot of people don't have to go abroad to go and study, we're going to reduce the demand for dollars for foreign education. If you fix our hospitals and people don't have to go to Germany, go to, where do they go to again for India. Medical care? India, go to Italy, go to wherever it is, France, anywhere that people go to for medical care, and stay back in Nigeria, we will reduce the demand for dollar or for foreign currency to go. Now, if we produce, for example, why are government officials still driving Toyota? Why are government officials still driving Lexus? Why are they still driving Mercedes-Benz? When you can go to Innocent, when you can go to Nord and tell this guy, look, we would even partner with you and make sure that there's a factory of Innocent in every region of this country. Okay. So that every government official drives an Innocent or any other car that is manufactured in Nigeria.
It should even be the official. It should be the official.
Go to India.
We hear all
go to India. Indians drive Tata.
Tata is.
I hear you, but
go to Germany.
When you hear all this, and it looks like government continues to say this: buy Nigerian, but government doesn't seem to follow that particular statement.
But it's the solution.
We've even heard allegations about certain governors who receive their allocations from the federal government and quickly convert to dollar before even doing anything. So all of that is by the way. We've seen the raid on BDCs this past week, which found a lot of people were confused. I mean, the new regulations are out. Makes sense, right? If you're going to deal in currency exchange, you should be properly regulated. But are those raids having any effect, you think, on what's happening? Was it the right way to go?
So for me, I don't think it was the right way. So I'll just try to break it open. So I don't think it was the right way because I feel that most of these BDCs that they were ready, were the monsters that they created in the first place. So these things were not thoughts that started, it did not just start yesterday. It has been going on for a while. So you coming out to read that they are the major cause of the rise in the dollar, and I would not wholly agree with that, because like I stated earlier, there is a supply gap. And if the banks, the CBN, cannot actually meet that supply gap, every other person goes where they can easily get it. And that's the BDCs. Yes, now the measures that they brought in to regulate the BDCs are good. But I used to work, I'd done some work with BDCs before. I'm like, it's like going back to the normal status quo before. Because the way it worked before was we had the central bank give the BDCs USD, they regulated the market. But one problem we have is we just come out to regulate in the short term, and in long term we lose sight of it. If they were properly regulated back then, we won't fall into the current crisis that we're falling into now. Then we had BDCs collect 20, 40,000, if I'm not correct, every week, and they had to resell. We saw a lot of them actually sell above what the market was meant to do, making abnormal profits. My question now is, where was the regulations then? Where were the policies then? Where was the CBN in clamping down on those BDCs at that point in time? Why is it now that everything is coming up, you're coming out to arrest BDCs? So I don't think it was effective, because during that raid, what we noticed was we saw the price of USD actually move up. It was during the raid we saw it move from 1.7, move up to 1.8, move up to 1.9, and that's because the supply gap at that point in time was having issues. What happened? The people that can sell to you will start to inflate their prices too, because it's a basic demand and supply issue. So I think that's what really happened at that point, and I think the current policies that the CBN brought in, if properly implemented, should
make some difference.
Yeah, not so much, but yeah, a little bit.
Very, very quickly, because we're out of time now. Should we be worried about these pockets of protests we're seeing?
Well, I think that the protests wouldn't make much difference, because if I may say something quickly about the BDC, before the CBN was a regulator and equally a player in one way. Now they are becoming a real regulator. So I think that the protests some people would capitalize the protests and do some damages. I fear that might happen. So we need to be very careful. The protest, everybody has a right to protest, but I don't think that it will make much difference in the scheme of things. The policies are tough.
But isn't that a reflection of the actual mood of people?
That's what I'm saying, that we're just going to shout, but it's not going to make a difference. The real difference would be, number one, government has to come up with tougher sanctions for all of us, not just for the people, not just for some states. It has to be something that cuts across board. Take, for example, if you're asking us to, bear with you, let us see that you're also cutting the cost of governance. If you're asking us to bear with you, let us see that you're not importing a 300 million, 500 million naira worth of car. If you're asking us to bear with you, let us see that you're not traveling excessively. So while the protests will not make much of a difference, let us see that the government is cutting costs and doing the needful to make sure that we're looking less at importing and looking more at using what we have.
But I hear this, right? But the truth is, like I said, these protests, the guy on the street doesn't understand. I mean, they probably understand.
Yeah.
But when you're hungry, right, it doesn't matter what the statistics are, what government is doing. They're thinking of the immediate. And we've seen it happen all over the world, where protests come out of nowhere and takes over the nation. We're hoping that doesn't become the case here. But the truth is, people are hungry, and a hungry man, like they say, is an angry man, right? Which is why I asked about short to medium term. We see constant increase in duties, for example. The customs are having a field day, pretty much. We're here in the Myceno Group subsidy in electricity. The one on fuel is already gone. So it's like every day there's more scary news for the Nigerian, right? So these are things that, government has to be able to do something at this point.
Yeah, so let me just respond to what you said. So for the first one, the removal of subsidy on, say, electricity tariff, the increase in price. So one thing I want to point out before I cover that is, we have a problem, and the problem now is regulation. Fine, we say inflation is at 29.9%. But if you're to go into the markets, talk to the real market people out there, we can see the inflation out there is above even the 35% that we're seeing, as Nigeria, because you're buying a crate of egg, you used to buy it for 2,000 to 1,500, now it's about 4,500. A pack of noodles have gone up to 12,000. And this price, it keeps increasing every day. So if we have to follow the normal statistics, then you have to just look at that something is wrong somewhere. Yes, we agree that we have FX issues. We have the constant increase in price of the FX. We have the supply chain issue in terms of transport, increased cost of transport. But one thing now is what measures are the government actually putting in place to actually watch or streamline the activities of even these manufacturers? Because in a way, I feel some of these prices are usually overbloated. Because say a price of something cannot just gain 300% and you go and attribute it to FX gains or the price of transport. Something is wrong somewhere and someone is benefiting from it directly or indirectly. So one thing they should do is look into those sectors. We have so many parastatals, so many agencies that are allegedly meant to look into those. The question now is, what are those people actually doing? Because we have this price explosion everywhere. What you have expected from a proactive government is they go out there, they look at those issues, that's what is actually going on, what is actually triggering this price, how can we help bring it down? Because
in fairness to what you just said, I saw FCCPC, that's the Federal Consumer Protection Agency. I don't know if that's the correct abbreviation now, but they were out in Abuja during the week and they actually locked down a particular store for price gouging. So something that was supposed to be sold at a particular amount, it was more than 300% increase, and FCCPC was actually out to make sure that that store was locked. However, there's a limited thing that FCCPC can do. Because if I tell you I got it at this rate and I'm selling at this rate and I can prove it, there's nothing you can do about that. For some issues, you may be able to prove it that no, it's not possible you got it at this rate and then tell me that's you must sell at this place. Mr. Falano, the revered gentleman who is a legal luminary, is also in court or trying to say that federal government needs to regulate prices. Price regulation is going to be very difficult, and it's going to be extremely difficult actually, because you don't know where I got mine from. And that's what is happening with cement. For example, somebody said in the morning price of cement was like maybe 5,000 naira. In the afternoon, it went to like 7,000 naira. In the evening, it went to like 9,000 naira. And it was the same store, not another place, the same store, the same customer. So we can argue about price regulation from the federal government, but I think there's a little they can do in that regard. We can say FCCPC should come in, but I can tell you I got my own from the UK, I got mine from the US, and if I say I got it there, and you talked about immigration, you talked about customs, if I tell you how much I paid on customs duty to bring this thing in, and I have to add that to my market, what are you going to do about that? So again, I think it comes back to let's look inward. Let's eat, because Nigerians also have a tendency of just adjusting and everybody just moves on. Let's look inward. What can let's produce locally, which we're already doing. The food that is wasting, and I can tell you food is wasting in the north. Let's find a way to make sure that it no longer wastes. Bring it down south, bring it to the west, bring it to south where they need it, and let's consume what we need locally.
Very, very quickly now, final word. Forecast for the rest of the year, economically. I want to make it a billion today.
Okay, so I don't know. Personally, for me, the forecast for this year is quite shaky. So looking at inflation, we see it's not something we are going to curb instantly. We still expect inflation to maintain its normal rates, pending when we're able to see something tangible from, say, the government to actually rein these inflationary measures in. NPC's meeting is open. I think it's holding tomorrow. Yeah. We are waiting for the outlook and we've seen the CBN actually try to control liquidity in markets. If you look at several auctions that happened, we've seen them actually rein in so much money. So I don't know, for me, the outlook is quite bleak for now. But I'm expecting that if the right measures are being put in place, we should be able to rein inflation down slightly. And by that I mean majorly food inflation, if they're able to tackle those issues that we mentioned earlier. So food inflation is the major cause of the issues we're having, because that contributes the highest. So if we're able to tackle that and tackle it, I think we should be fine as a country.
Well, thank you very much, Fola, Daniel. Thank you very much, Adeyemi Jimoh.
Thank you so much.
I guess the message is buckle up, Nigerians. We're in for a very long ride in 2024. We're going to take a quick break now, and we will be right back. Please stay with us.
Don't just stand there teasing me. Now it's time to show